Hi, I'm Олексія Ковжуна, and this is Ukrainian accent. That's because I'm Ukrainian, and of course this is my accent, and I'm happy to introduce my dear friend Люк Гардінґ, who is here with me today. Hello.
Hey, good to see you.
Luke, besides being a correspondent, you're also a book writer, and we'll talk about your books. One of them is written about this phase of war in Ukraine, which is called Invasion, and it's translated into Ukrainian. And the other, you wrote, what, 9 of them?
So yeah, something like that. 8 or 9. Yeah.
I have it on my shelf. And one of your books became, older one, became quite actual, quite contemporary for the time. It was called Collusion, and it was about Donald Trump and his connection with Russia. Друзі, вибачте, що перериваю подкаст, але в мене до вас є прохання. Випуск таких подкастів – це досить складний і, головне, трохи дорогий процес, а ми з ґрунтом не отримуємо грошей від рептилоїдів, банкірів, жидомасонів, олігархів, корумпованих політиків. Вони нас не підтримують. Ми робимо свою роботу виключно завдяки вам і створюємо нові проекти саме за ваші донати. Тож, вибачте, якщо у вас є можливість, підтримайте, будь ласка, вихід саме цієї серії подкастів на монобазі. Це може бути одноразовий донат або підписка на спільноту, це дуже сильно нам допоможе. Ну а ті, хто оформить підписку, отримують доступ до закритого телеграм-каналу з цікавинками, приколами, опитуваннями щодо майбутніх відео. Тож ви можете впливати на те, що ми робимо не тільки підтримкою, а ще впливати на контент. Дякую вам дуже, особливо тим, хто вже підтримує нас тривалий час. Дякую. Без вас було б набагато складніше.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote Collusion in 2016 after he was elected for the first time. It was published in 2017. It was so the title for the US edition, published by Vintage in New York, was Collusion: Secret Meetings, Dirty Money, and How Russia Helped Donald Trump Win. And that's pretty sexy, right? And it turned out to be a number one New York Times bestseller. Everybody was reading it. At this point, the kind of link between Trump and Russia was kind of known, but no one was really across the detail. And many of the people didn't know the backstory, which I tried to explain about how the KGB had been cultivating Donald Trump for a very long time, watching him, spying on him since the late 1970s via Czech Secret Service, then bringing him to Moscow in the summer of 1987 when he went on a trip within tourists. And so I was kind of trying to explain whether Trump was a Russian asset or a confidential contact or a useful idiot, but also explaining the kind of world of the KGB in those days when really they were very keen to develop American assets. They realized that the old techniques of ideology, of sympathy, of communists believing in the cause, that was broken after Hungary, after Czechoslovakia, and so on. So they were basically looking for kind of people who they could bribe, people who were corruptible, who had affairs, you know, who liked sexual adventures. Yeah. And basically you look at Donald Trump and you look at the KGB documents for that, which were leaked, of course, by Oleg Gordievsky, famous KGB intelligence officer who defected to the UK, got out of the Soviet Union by MI6 in the mid-1980s. And Donald Trump is he's a sort of KGB dream. I mean, if you were a retired KGB general writing a novel in Moscow about an American president who does everything Russia wants, you would alight on a kind of Donald Trump-like figure.
Yeah, but for some reason, I do remember they broke champagne in Gosduma in Russia when Trump became president, but he didn't work that much on the Russian side. Unlike this time, what changed, do you think? What is his interest? He wants, it looks that America switched sides.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I think the difference between Trump 1 and Trump 2 is that the pro-Russian proclivities, the pro-Russian tendencies were there all along. But in Trump 1, there were grown-ups who were serving in his administration. There were people like, John Bolton and various others who believed in a kind of traditional America or traditional American power In other words, of the use of American military might abroad, of U.S. geopolitical dominance, of a strong relationship with Europe, and so on. And Trump too, he's purged all those people, and he just has the morons and the cheerleaders surrounding him. And also on top of that, I think, unfortunately, kind of Ukraine and Russia has become part of the kind of American political conversation. That's a polite way of putting it. I mean, it's become incredibly entrenched, where being pro-Ukrainian is seen as being pro-Biden. So if you hate Biden, therefore you support Ukraine. I mean, it's this kind of crude binary. So I think it's the fact that grown-ups are gone, the propaganda has grown even bigger, and Trump has been unleashed. I mean, this is the sort of true Trump, and really, it's. I mean, what can we say? We can say he's the most pro-Russian president in American history. We can say that everything he does pleases the Kremlin, both on a geopolitical level and on a kind of Ukraine level. And yeah, America swapped sides. America wants, I mean, I hate to say it, but they want Ukraine to lose and Russia to win.
Because when full-scale invasion started, we were a bit lost because our allies didn't imagine the victory, because you cannot win if you cannot imagine what victory will be. So we produced the document about sustainable peace in Ukraine, because Biden administration was afraid of Ukrainian victory, because that would break the status quo. And now we can see that they switch sides, I mean, openly. But is there method in this madness?
From who?
From American point of view, when they lose with that mad tariff wars, with they're switching, breaking ties with Europe and with Britain.
I mean, yeah, well, is the method there? I mean, there's a sort of primitive ideology. I mean, it's America first. It's basically isolationist, and it is it's authoritarian. And you look at, why does Donald Trump have this kind of relationship with Vladimir Putin? And there are different answers, but on one level, one explanation, it's a explanation, not the explanation, is ideological. In other words, a lot of hard-right Americans, Trump-supporting Americans, think there is something admirable about Russian politics and Russian civilization. Here is a conservative, Christian, white country that hates gay people, hates lesbians, hates feminists, hates liberals, hates woke, believes in sovereignty, hates transnational institutions like the European Union or the UN or whatever, and they see that as some kind of template for what America should be, actually, and it's a sort of ludicrous fantasy by
childish,
a
right?
teenager who's not read enough books.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's believed by Donald Trump and the people around him on some fundamental level. And they also, I mean, I'm not sure they've read Hegel, but they quite like this sort of destructive thesis that you smash the old system and build the new. Bolshevik about it. So you smash the universities, you smash
intellectuals,
you smash intellectuals, you deport foreigners, you smash newspapers or you co-opt them. And actually on some profound level, I think what we're seeing, I mean, this is a process. So we're just going down this road, this dark road. We're seeing the Putinization of America. It brings me back to my time in Moscow and what I was kind of watching there as a correspondent for the Guardian newspaper, just the wrapping up of civil society, doing things which are illegal and unthinkable and impossible, but you've done them while your opponents are in disarray. And moving forward. So it's a scary, unsettling time. And unfortunately, the kind of primary victim of this chaos is Ukraine.
Yeah, it's an interesting understanding that we live in pivotal point of the universe, but it's not very comfortable place to be.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, in my view, actually, Serhii Plokhy, the wonderful historian, makes this point as well. In my view, Kiev now occupies the same role that Berlin played during the Cold War. It's the place where the destiny of Europe and to some large extent the world system will be decided. So what we've got the nihilistic, Ruski Mir world of empire, of just basically blatant imperialism of big states overrolling smaller states.
19th century, basically.
Well, 19th century or maybe even medieval. I mean, you think about what happened in Bucha. That didn't look 19th century. That looked 14th century to me. I mean, I was there after the Russians left. I saw it. It was, I've done a lot of bad stuff in my career. That was probably the worst thing I've seen. But so you've got that. You've got a coalition of autocratic states, coalition of dictators, North Korea, Russia, Iran, China. And then on the other side, you've got representatives of what you might call the kind of post-1945 ascendancy. So you've got the European Union, you've got the UK, you've got the democracies of South Korea and Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and so on, who believe in what we used to call the Enlightenment, believe in values, believe in human dignity, democracy and certain principles enshrined after the Second World War in the UN Charter, like the fact you don't invade your neighbor and say that territory is now my territory. And these are two rival visions of the world. And what is so disorientating is that for my entire adult lifetime, the Americans were with the Democrats and were with the good guys standing up to the evil Soviet Union. Now the Americans have swapped sides and are standing with the despots. And this isn't hyperbole. I mean, America twice in recent weeks has voted with North Korea and Russia in the UN General Assembly, not the Security Council, and other allies like Belarus and Eritrea. I mean, if those are your friends, you have seriously lost the plot.
Absolutely. But what bothers me, really, that we can see that axis of evil, and it's very well organized, and they work with each other, and they develop in their relationships and deepen them, like North Korean soldiers, Chinese soldiers, Iranian drones. But the coalition of good is indecisive. It's not all together yet.
I mean, you're right, but I do think these things are perspectival. I mean, you can shade up, brighter or shade down, and also, I mean, just on the axis of evil, or I quite like crinks: China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. The crinks, crinky, crinkdom, crinkiness. But yes, they have a kind of anti-Western stance which unites them. They hate America. They want America to be, to be smooshed. But also they've got differences. I mean, Iran's main enemy is Israel. Russia's main enemy is Ukraine and the Western world. China wants Taiwan, and so there are differences. It's sort of pragmatic alliance. And on the other side, for sure, the Europeans have been indecisive. But at the same time, you might argue they've been pretty good. I mean, they've supported Ukraine. I mean, they've made mistakes, like they haven't re-industrialized their military complexes quickly enough.
They spend time that
but I speak as a representative of a country that voted for Brexit with Russian pushing. You have to acknowledge. I mean, we've done some very stupid stuff, and now the UK under Keir Starmer, whom I quite like, by the way, is sort of back in Europe, helping Ukraine, trying to convene support for Ukraine. So the strange thing is that Trump has consolidated Europe. I mean, with if you exclude Orban and the Slovaks, has consolidated Europe in a way which was not possible 5 years ago. So because the world is so binary, I think we have rediscovered a sense of strategic purpose that we know what it's about. What is NATO for? NATO is to contain a revanchist and horrible Russia.
It was for stopping Russia, keeping Germany in check, and keeping America in Europe. That was
right, because
right?
America traditionally was a security guarantor not just of Europe but of the world. I mean, they had 40 bases around the world, and that they were a kind of global policeman. And now, of course, they're
and now this
now they're not. Now Trump's vision,
illusion is over.
Trump's vision is of kind of guys wearing 1960s shirts, making widgets. That seems to be his vision of America. But I mean, as if robots are not a thing or AI is not sort of thing or so on. I mean, it's an incredibly regressive view. But that's a separate point. But I think in terms of, so in geostrategic terms, where we are now is we're back to containment 2.0. You know, the famous George Kennan doctrine developed in the Long Telegram in the mid-1940s that basically no point in talking to Russia or trying to reach a mutual solution with Russia. You just have to contain its worst aggressive tendencies, aggressive and expansionist tendencies. And that's where we are. No point in trying to talk to Putin or negotiate with Putin. We just need to rearm, strengthen our borders, support Ukraine, and keep the barbarians out.
But could it be won? I mean, could we change Russia in the end of this war? Could
well,
we...
you've had a go. I'm not sure you've worked yet. It's worked yet, has it? I mean, even with your great magical powers, I mean, Russia is still as irredeemable as ever. And you know, I spent 4 years in Moscow. I mean, I kind of and had some happy moments there and some pretty dark moments as well, which we can talk about. But I think one of the problems is you know, the Russians, particularly the Russian elite, they just believe their own propaganda. I mean, there's this whole apparatus of the Russian state creates this vast metafictional reality that kind of corresponds with what's in Putin's brain. But it's as if you have a sort of 1,000, you know, rather bad magicians doing a conjuring trick to make a dazzling balloon stay up in the air. I mean, and really the balloon just wants to be on the ground. But they have to do all this stuff, you know, that Ukraine is full of neo-Nazis, that it's run by America, that there was a coup in 2014. I mean, they have to invent all this stuff because this is what Putin thinks. And it's this
and then they start to believe in it.
Effort, and then they believe in it. They believe their own propaganda. And hey, you know, in the run-up to the full-scale invasion in 2022, the Russians were paying billions of dollars to, you know, opposition bloc, to pro-Russian politicians inside Ukraine who were saying there's a corrupt, pro-Western, you know, kind of layer at the top of the Ukrainian government, and everyone else, they just want to be Russians. And you'll send in tanks, they'll be greeted with flowers and cake, and it'll be lovely. They'll have tea, and the Russian soldiers can flirt with the Ukrainian girls, and everything will be back in the right place. And this was a complete fairy tale written by a moron. And because it corresponded with what Putin thought was reality, of course, they went with it, and then they got smashed in the face.
And then and they didn't say like, "Oops, it was a mistake. Sorry, we want." They push again and
they
again.
Doubled down. I mean, they doubled down because otherwise you would be accepting or conceding the Führer made a mistake. The Führer can't make a mistake. I mean, the Tsar has to be immaculate, impeccable. There have to be 5 Tsars. You've got one Tsar, you've got an AI Tsar, a video Tsar, you've got the Tsar who's like this, you know, moving one arm and not the other arm at the end of a very long table. And then you've got the other Tsar in Dagestan plunging into a crowd of random people and hugging them. I mean, is that the same person? Of course it's not, you know. So but in a way this is just their fairy taleization of Russian politics. Look, you know, you've only got one body. But this man is so powerful, he's got 5 bodies.
Yeah, he's superhuman.
He's a superhuman. And also, moreover, he's immortal. You can't kill him. You evil Ukrainians can't kill him. Because you kill him and then poof, he's back.
But they cannot evolve. But our understanding of the world evolves, and I think you, as a Western intellectual, Western liberal intellectual, you believed in...
keep the compliments coming.
in basic goodness of people, and you involved some of the Russians, not all of them, of course, but some of the Russians you believed could be good, could be redeemable. And then after...
Alex, I see this, you're trying to steer me towards this great elephant trap with a whole load of spikes, which I'm going to go, oh, fall down to the pit, and then the spike will go up my bottom, like that. I mean, I think it's kind of complicated. And I'm not a kind of advocate for the good Russian. I mean, I've spent so long here. I've seen so much bad stuff, including, you know, recently Sumy. I've lived in Russia. I've got no illusions at all about it. And I understand the kind of Ukrainian point of view, which is that it's not just Putin
yeah.
and the evil generals around him who are guilty. I'm afraid it's all Russians, pretty much. It's ordinary Russians who are killing and raping and themselves being killed, who are slaves to the Tsar. And okay, it's a totalitarian society, and there is enormous propaganda, but some people.
But it's a bad civilization somehow.
Well, I mean, so, but some people resist it, and some people have left. All I can say, without falling into an elephant trap, is that the Russian journalists I used to work with when I was there, and writers and intellectuals, whatever, they've all left. And not all of them left in 2022. Quite a few of them left before. And quite a few of them are on have been a criminal investigation. Their bank accounts have been frozen. And, we can debate whether their books, accusing Russia of imperialism are good books or bad books. But, I have a small group of Russians who I think get it, friends, I would say. But that doesn't negate what I'm doing here and what I understand my task as a journalist and writer to be, which is basically to not be an activist, because I think these two things are different, being a journalist and activist, but to describe what happened. And if you just describe what is happening in Ukraine, that reality is so awful and persuasive. It's sufficient.
You're here every month, and at least you spend at least a week at the front line every month. I think it's more than most of the people in the world do. It's more than most Ukrainians do.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very hard, and it's heart-tearing, and it's awful. So I'm very grateful for what you're doing.
Well, the strange paradox is the closer I am to the front line, the more cheerful I am. Does that make sense? I mean, because I spend a lot of time with brigades, all sorts of brigades. I was just been messaging brigades. I was messaging them over the weekend saying, "Is there a ceasefire?" And they all said, "No, there's no ceasefire." Russians, it's another ordinary day at war. Russians doing what they do: shooting, shelling, bombing, droning, infantry assaults, and so on. But the point is that there are a lot of competent professional guys who know why they're fighting. Everyone knows why they're fighting and what they're doing, and who are very good at killing Russians. And yes, the Russians have had some tactical success in the east and the south, and it's been like that since 2023.
And it's a lot of them.
But there's been no breakthrough. I mean, we're sitting in Kiev. I mean, Kiev stands. All of the major industrial centers of Ukraine stand. I mean, Sumy stands, despite what happened last week. So on a big level, the Russians have failed. I mean, their plan was very clear: take Kiev, put a Russian trickle over Kreshchatyk, execute Zelensky with a shot in the middle of the forehead, kill his cabinet, quell unrest from grumpy people like you, over coming weeks by using brutal methods and beating people up and arresting and torturing them. And they assumed that by the summer of 2022, they would have Ukraine.
It would be that, yeah.
It would be mission accomplished. And the West would reluctantly suck it up and accept this new reality. And by now it would just be, it would be, and they'd bring back that kind of oak tree Yanukovych, perhaps. I don't know, but they had a plan. They had cast, I mean, I don't know this for sure, but there are various pieces of evidence which you can assemble. They'd cast their cabinet, foreign minister, prime minister, defense minister. Yeah,
they were in Belarus at that time.
Well, they were shuttling between Belgrade and Minsk, right? The two points. And that was one of the reasons you see, what's interesting is that I always believed they were going to do it. So I came back to Ukraine more or less permanently from late 2021. I was in Mariupol. I was on the front line. I stayed in Genichesk, in an Elvis-themed hotel. I went to the border with Crimea because I thought they're going to do it. And a lot of people were saying, no, they're not going to do it. It's a feint. It's just diplomacy. It's pressure.
I didn't believe it till the last second.
Well, I always believed it because I know how those guys think. And generally with Putin, you have a really bad option and you have a absolutely awful option. Go with absolutely awful because that's generally where you land. And so it didn't surprise me. And funnily enough, my wife Phoebe, when because I wrote Invasion, my book published in Ukrainian by Vivat. I wrote it in 2022, and as a bit of a kind of exercise in catharsis. I came back from Bucha, then I'd sit at my desk in, near London, and I would just write this thing with tears going down my face. And I called it invasion, but my wife Phoebe says, no, don't call it invasion. Call it, I fucking told you so. I fucking told you. Anyway, we didn't call it I fucking told you so. But the reason I say that is there were a group of us, relatively small group of us, who were Western experts, some British, some American, and some on the left, some on the right. I mean, myself, I'm sort of centre left. Anne Applebaum, she's centre right. Other people like Catherine Belton from the Financial Times, Peter Pomerantsev, who's a great friend of Ukraine, and so on. And we were saying, this Russian state is not merely domestically oppressive and toxic and not very nice. It has grandiose ambitions, and it is adventurist, imperialist. It's an imperialist power and also a fascist power. And we both said, no, you're hysterical. You're a Russophobe. This is too much. Your brain has been addled. One of my colleagues accused me of catastrophizing. Catastrophizing. Who was right? I think I was right.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I wouldn't wish it to be so, but basically we were right. And the world of politics, the world of think tanks. I mean, some people got it, but most did not. They just hoped that maybe Russia would go away. Because if it didn't go away, then they had to make really tough decisions about what they were going to do by way of response.
Yeah, but I believe it was also the problem with representative democracy is maybe it will be after my term. Not on my term, please. Because I have to raise taxes, I have to maybe do a military draft. It's not very popular. Maybe it will be after me. But let me just sit my term in peace.
Isn't it just so much cleaner and more efficient to have a strong man at the top of the state who doesn't have to worry about little things like elections? I mean, Putin looks at these European leaders and he regards them as weak little butterflies that either he can crush, or he just waits until the end of the summer and they stop flapping their little wings and they roll over and the German butterfly is dead, or the British butterfly is, put a pin inside its own stomach and voted for Brexit, I mean, and that's sort of his view that his counterparts are ephemeral, weak, have to face elections, and that he's not thinking about, next year. He's thinking about 1,000 years. He's thinking, do you remember the 1,000-Year Reich? Does that ring any bells? I mean, he's sort of thinking...
Yeah, but it got, 12 years of the 1,000 years?
Yeah, but unfortunately we've had 25 years of over. And I don't know, I think he would quite like to do 25 more.
Oh, absolutely. And I do remember his interview with Tucker Carlson, which he started with Prince Oleg. He, in the 11th century, he went there and it was like, what? I mean, these Trump administration idiots, they go and worship at Putin's feet and they get this tedious and tendentious history lesson for 3 hours. And then, you do a sort of little bit of video about how wonderful the supermarkets are. I mean, they are in some strange, delusional space. Yeah, and I think your metaphor about this meta reality that
the wizards blowing the balloon, blowing up the enticing Ruski Mir balloons so that it's there for all to see.
And then Tucker Carlson sees balloons.
He sees balloon and goes, "Oh look, there's a beautiful balloon, Russian civilization, isn't it? So great. If only we could have a civilization like that." But actually, who is moving to Russia? No one's moving to Russia. What are Russians? What does Russian industry make that people want? Nothing.
Well, they gave cultural influence, like the word pogrom.
Well,
it's Russian invention. Also, compromat.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I could thank them for the fact I've been able to write so many books. I mean, they are the world's foremost spy state, and they think in deeply conspiratorial terms. I mean, our meeting now is a conspiracy.
Yeah,
that bottle of water is a conspiracy. We go and get a coffee, that's a spetsoperatia. I mean, everything is imprinted with this sort of KGB
a lot of memes. Yeah.
And for example, it's not possible in a country, particularly in a post-Soviet country, that where there's a corrupt government, that citizens could get together on the street and protest against their corrupt government. It must be the CIA,
of course,
paying people to do this. And one of the things I discovered in Moscow when I was there was that they mirror think everything. So they think basically the West is a shinier version of Russia, but essentially it's the same, that all elites are corrupt, that you can buy anyone, that every foreign journalist is a spy. So I work for The Guardian, but of course at night, you know, when I'm not writing my stories for The Guardian, which anyone can read for free because we don't have a paywall, I am cabling top secret messages back to my handlers in MI6. And it's ludicrous. I mean,
cannot disprove it.
I took my kids to school on a tram, you know, or sometimes I would like stop a Lada in the street, and you know, I didn't have an Aston Martin. I mean, everything I did was there, and also they broke repeatedly into my apartment, and they placed bugs everywhere. They had video in the bedroom. On one occasion, they left us a sex manual to show that they were watching by the marital bed, which I shared with my British wife. So when I was supposed to have the time and space to do the secret stuff, I don't know. But in a way, I'm applying my kind of, you know, educated Oxford Cartesian brain to a world of Russian paranoia and darkness and absurdity, actually. These people are absurd. And it would be funny were it not for the fact that they were so murderous.
Yeah, if not funny, if not scary. But the world is taking them as like thing that is there, so there is a reason for it to be, in a sense. It's new conversation about containment. Well, it's coming back.
Yeah.
But do you think Europe will move fast enough to be able to do it?
Well, I mean, basically, the Europeans could never move fast enough. I mean, how many Patriot missile systems would Ukraine like? 10, 100, 1,000, 100,000? I mean, you know, Ukraine is. I mean, you see now that Ukraine is making 40% of its own defense stuff. I mean, it's the world's leading producer of drones, the world's leading drone innovator. The whole nature of war has changed, and Ukraine's done an incredible job. And the Europeans are kind of supporting. I mean, even the UK has started making artillery shells again. There was an announcement about it today. And so there definitely is a change. I mean, my father, John Harding, he's 84 years old. He didn't do military service in the UK. His older brother, my uncle, who's now dead, Richard, did military service. So that gives you an idea of how long ago we abolished military service. You know, our army is tiny. It's the size it was 2 centuries ago. Our navy is a couple of ships. I mean, I had a conversation with the former head of the British Army over a cup of coffee in London. And I said, why did we give Ukraine only 14 Challenger 2 tanks? 14. And he said, well, we have 100. Half of them don't work, and we need the other ones. It's kind of funny, not funny. And so, yeah, we are, everybody is waking up, but these things take time. You know, the Swedes are making loads of stuff. Rheinmetall, the Germans are making loads of stuff. The Finns, you know, so people are moving, not as quickly as you would wish, but everybody understands what's at stake. That we're in an existential place. And I sort of think, I don't want to be prognosticative. I don't want to be doomy. But let's say in a year's time, Donald Trump removes American troops in the Baltic states, pulls them all out, or says to Lithuania, okay, you owe us $200 billion for all of the post-war security assistances we've given you. And the Lithuanians say, well, I'm really sorry, we can't pay you $200 billion. Then he says, right, I'm out. At that point, I can, you know, maybe not a full-blown invasion, but I can definitely envisage a border incident where Putin tests NATO, you know, Article 5 of NATO. Is it still a thing, or is it?
Yeah, and will it be?
Well, I mean, the Americans are not going to help.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Baltic states not stupid. They've got very good analysts, really clever people. I meet a lot of sort of senior Baltic-y people when they pass through London. I come and see them, and they're aware of this. You know, they understand. And actually what's interesting is this sort of coalition supporting Ukraine. I mean, it's gone through different phases, but the keenest members of it are the Baltic states, the Nordic countries,
and you guys.
The Brits, us, and on a good day, the French. and probably
And hopefully
the Germans again when Merz comes in as Chancellor in May.
Then again, the thing is, do we have this time?
Well, I mean, there's never enough time. Of course, there's not enough time. But again, I think you can look at the positive as well, insofar as Putin basically was not expecting what happened after 2022. I mean, he wasn't expecting to be defeated militarily in the Kiev region. That's one.
And he didn't expect West to be...
But he didn't expect the West to be quite so united and clear in its support for Ukraine. And for sure, there were problems along the way. I mean, Olaf Scholz, actually the Germans gave loads, but he was trying to appease the sort of the peacenik faction with it, basically pro-Russian faction with his own party. I mean, there were nuances, there were complexities, but overall, I think Europe understands what the task is and is trying to do something about it, but it also understands why the European Union is so important.
Do you think there's a chance that you will undo Brexit with new geopolitical reality to become closer to European Union, or maybe even some kind of honorary member of EU? Well,
I mean, in my fever dream, this is what happens, and I think that unfortunately the political reality in the UK is it's not going to happen, because Keir Starmer, who has a huge majority, I mean, he was shadow Brexit minister. He doesn't like Brexit. He voted for Remain, as did most of the people in his party, apart from the ones on the far left. But the reality is they are worried that this huge majority, a lot of it consists of what's called red wall seats, where people voted for Brexit. So poorer areas of the north, coastal regions, big industrial cities like kind of Birmingham or, places like that. And so it's very easy for the right-wing parties to use that as an attack line, that he wants to reverse Brexit. So I think it won't formally happen, but I think what there definitely is happening already is this definite kind of closeness with Europe and a sense of common moral purpose, particularly over Ukraine. Ukraine is the glue that is binding everyone together. I mean, if suddenly the Russians give up and you turn into just a regular, boring society with your own problems, then probably we'll start punching each other again. But for now, because it feels like an inflection point in history, Ukraine is keeping us honest. Actually, so there is a movement towards Europe. What I find so depressing as someone who lived in Berlin, I was the Germany correspondent for The Guardian before I went to Moscow for 4 years. I speak German, I speak Russian, I understand Ukrainian. Is that we've lost the right to live in the European Union. So, previously you could just say, okay, I'm going to go live in Paris for a year, and you go live in Paris or Spain or Malta or wherever the hell you want, or Greece. And now it's 90 days. That's it. And just if you think about, the number of kids who would have fallen in love with a French girl or a French boy, or had an adventure, or learned a new language, or written a bad novel, or, all of those kind of cultural, personal, romantic opportunities that were available when I was growing up have been curtailed. For what? For some idea of sovereignty that it turns out that we've got globalization. Who knew? It's just it's a Vidumke. Am I allowed to use that word?
Absolutely.
It's a ludicrous sort of fantasy, and the result is we're poorer and a bit stupider.
Yeah, and less adventurous and less more creative in a sense.
Yeah, although I say all that, but at the same time, I do think the UK is actually quite rather good has good for soft power.
Oh, absolutely.
And I say this, I mean, in the privacy of the podcast. I mean, I went to a very good party last weekend at your flat, where a lot of people who were basically Ukrainian, apart from one British guy wearing a police helmet, were singing badly to the Smiths. Dancing on the sofa, singing that kind of dirgy 1980s stuff. I mean, I wasn't a special fan of the Smiths, but obviously something is cutting through, whether it's songs or pop or Beatles or culture or Harry Potter or Rudyard Kipling or the Queen or the King.
Robin Hood.
Or Robin Hood or
King Arthur.
King Arthur with his mythical sword. I mean, or Conan Doyle. You know, I actually reread the Sherlock Holmes stories when I was here. I picked up a copy of Shakespeare's sonnets, by the way, in English, and I read a sonnet a day.
Wow.
I'm on 150 at the moment. And you can't read more than one. It's like drinking really, really good claret. You can have a couple of glasses and then you have to stop, because otherwise you spoil it. So with a Shakespearean sonnet, you read it and I think about it for 10 minutes in the morning, then I move on. So definitely. So I sort of think as a nation, we are actually, we've got quite a lot to offer. And one other thing I do like, despite Brexit, which I hate, is that it's definitely a country of immigrants. I mean, go to London; it's one of the most international cities in the world. But I think we're, and of course we have far right, but it is relatively tolerant. We don't quite have the same prob crap that the French and the Germans have. I mean, it's, you know, you can be brown, green, blue, yellow, and read the news, and actually no one really cares, or actually notices. So yes, there's racism. It's not a perfect society. Yes, there's prejudice, but I don't feel and yes, we had riots last summer, but I still don't feel that it's very widespread.
I do believe it was instigated by Russians. I still
well, I mean, you know, that's a whole interesting conversation, because on the one hand, you don't want to overstate Russian agency, and on the other hand, you don't want to say it doesn't exist when it does exist. It's a bit like with the Russian influence in the Brexit vote. I mean, I wrote a whole book about this called Shadow State, with a chapter called Londongrad, about how the Russians pushed for Brexit. And there is strong but circumstantial evidence, I say this in case there are lawyers listening, that there were also kind of financial contributions from Russia to the whole kind of Brexit campaign, right? We can't prove that. We were unable to prove that. What we do know was there was a huge social media campaign by Russian bots and trolls pushing Brexit.
Pushing for it, yeah.
So you know, my point isn't the Russians caused Brexit, it's that they co-caused Brexit. And what any proper government would do would be to hold a public inquiry, calling in stuff from government agencies, the spies, everybody, to try and find out what happened so it doesn't happen again. And that didn't happen because the Conservatives, who are the beneficiaries of this, didn't want it to happen.
Yeah, nobody wants to to see into details of things that they perceive as victory.
They perceive as victory, but actually, if the KGB are helping, then the victory becomes tarnished in some way.
But there are still like a couple of 100,000 Russians in London only.
I mean, I heard that. I haven't counted them. I mean, there are definitely some. Some of them are exiles who can't go back, actually, and who support Ukraine.
Yeah, but I mean,
but some of them are not.
Yeah.
And some of them have been there a long time. I mean, my sense is that, and definitely Londongrad was a huge thing for a long time, where Russians bought newspapers like the Evening Standard. Yeah. I knew Alexander Lebedev very well in Moscow, actually, the oligarch.
Yeah,
he bought the Evening Standard.
Ex-FSB guy,
ex-KGB guy. I mean, he was the KGB. Residency in the Soviet embassy in the late 1980s. You know, Abramovich bought Chelsea. You know, we
it was a huge press.
It was a huge thing, but definitely there was a kind of cooling after 2014 where Russia, you know, the UK became less fashionable. But there was definitely about 2 decades where, you know, you got your diamonds from this place, and you sent your kids for education to that place, and that place was a private school in England with beautiful grounds and
with traditions.
Kids with traditions, wearing blazers with floppy hair and rowing, and you know, and you would turn your little son or daughter into an English gentleman or an English lady, and that was enormous. It was Harry Potter. That was enormously seductive for a while, and I think that again has mostly stopped.
Because what is it's a lot of Ukrainian flags in the UK.
There are. I keep sending them to you.
Yeah,
I walk around a random village in the middle of nowhere with 2 ducks and a 14th century church, and there'll be a Ukrainian flag on top of the church. And you know, me, the sentimentalist that I am, I start tearing up, because you know, who put the flag there? I don't know. You know, generally we don't hang flags on 14th century churches, but there is enormous sympathy for Ukraine still. And the greatest thing is that there is no political division. It's not like America, where the Republicans hate Ukraine and love Russia, and the Democrats the
Yeah,
reverse.
we become
Basically,
a point,
everybody, even people like Nigel Farage on the far right of British politics, support Ukraine because he's too canny. He just knows it's a vote loser. If you say Zelensky is evil, no one's going to vote for you because we basically, fair play. I don't want to overstate it, but we can basically see that Ukraine is the victim in this situation. And we sympathize with the underdog.
Yeah, and you guys, because you invented sports as we know them, and you invented fair play, and when it's broken, like it was in Oval, famous in Oval Office.
Well, right. So I mean, I do think the political theatre, the choreography of what happened after the Oval Office in late February was totally fascinating. So Zelensky walks in to the Oval Office, he gets duffed up, smashed in the face by Vance, kicked out with a boot in his backside. Then he flies to London. Probably, I don't know. I haven't asked him about this yet. Yeah, I mean, I would like to, but probably feeling a bit miserable, perhaps. And there is Keir Starmer, who is not the world's most charismatic politician, but Keir Starmer, who's been trying to stay on good terms with Trump, but also supporting Zelensky, hugs him in front of the cameras on Downing Street. Smiles, talks, chats, and then, and this is the bit that I really love, is when they finish the meeting. Normally, someone just leaves and that's it, and then he walks with him to his car, hugs him again, shakes him by the hand, like a father waving goodbye to his kid going off to university, and then waves him off, and then lays on a helicopter so Zelensky can go meet the king in Norfolk. I mean, so formally he's very friendly with Trump, the America our ally, but that choreography is basically saying fuck off America.
Yeah,
in quite a subtle,
just to be fair play. Yeah,
quite a subtle way. But you can interpret. That's the only way to interpret it, is that actually Zelensky is our ally, and you are not going to bully us into giving up Zelensky.
Yeah, it gives one hope. What did you think about that ceasefire? It was, I think, it was great. You have to admire Russian. Dark genius in just announcing the ceasefire one-sided in East for the Easter, and then we see on Fox News broadcast of the service from the Russian church.
I have to do a clarification here, because Fox News, I wrote that in my story, and Fox News messaged me and said it's not Fox News, it's Fox TV stations, which is apparently some subsidiary of your bad. Anyway, whatever, what the hell, I'm Kiev, Russia. Well, I mean, so I think I said I was messaging guys at the weekend, and they said it's business as usual, Russians are attacking it and so on. I mean, it's clearly a play for the MAGA morons that Russia is sincere about peace. And unfortunately, these people are so stupid, so ill-educated, so underread, so ill-informed, they will kind of probably believe it, but you know what's coming, right? What's coming is that what the Trump people are pushing behind the scenes in their their conversations with the Europeans, with the Brits and so on, is sort of capitulation light for Ukraine. I mean, it's not full-blown capitulation. It's not Germany in 1945, but it's basically, you lose everything you've lost is gone. Crimea is Russia's. No NATO, no security guarantees, no nothing. That's it. Take it. And the way it will play out is that when Ukraine says no, we can't give Russia 20% of our territory after so many people have been killed, after so many wives have lost their husbands, parents have lost their sons, and so on, then Trump will say, well, we offered you a deal, you're too stupid to take it. It's all on you.
Forget about it.
Oh, by the way, give us your minerals. That I'm afraid is how it's going to work. He's not going to blame Russia. He's not going to blame Putin.
Yeah, it looks like he loses interest in this story, because he hoped that it will be over soon, like Putin believed that Russian soldiers would be met with flowers. Trump thought he'll speak with these guys, and then receive his Nobel Prize. And because it's not that fast, it seems like he's losing interest.
I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a professor at Cambridge of psychology, but he's clearly one, a pathological narcissist, but two, lazy.
Yeah,
lazy. And if you look at, to be serious, if you look at things like the Northern Ireland peace process, actually there were rounds of secret and then public negotiations between the IRA and the British government. John Major, Prime Minister, who I think kind of underrated, then Tony Blair. And then finally, we ended with this landmark Good Friday Agreement. It took years of hard work to solve an impossible problem, basically. Two warring sides who've been fighting for 30 years to kind of bring them together. And that peace has sort of held. I mean, the same with the Iranian nuclear deal.
Yeah.
Actually, I mean, okay, it's subsequently unraveled because Trump kind of walked away from it. But there was a lot. I mean, I know Cathy Ashton, who was one of the negotiators. She's a former EU High Commissioner for Foreign Affairs. Very clever, interesting woman. The amount of effort that went into trying to persuade Iran to sign up to this. Years of negotiations, round tables, separate rooms, shuttle diplomacy. Bored diplomats throwing bits of paper at empty plastic water bottles. I mean, it was hard, and Trump is just not willing to do this. And also, the whole conversation is wrong. The whole approach is wrongly premised. It's premised from the idea that the Russians want peace. The Russians don't want peace. They want to destroy Ukraine, enslave you, kill you, rape you, make Ukraine disappear from the map, de-Ukrainize Ukraine, get rid of its culture, its poetry, its ethnography, everything. It's fascist, the fascist project. And the Americans don't seem to understand this. They just think it's a, war stirred up by regional grievances. And Russian speakers against everyone else. It's so primitive. I mean, it's almost illiterate, but that's where we are.
Yeah, the world is sad, gloomy place unless some great people who give you hope, and you are one of them.
Well, thank you. And that is basically where you end up, is that in dark times you have to love each other, you have to be cheerful, and people of good faith and solidarity, whether they're Ukrainian or British or someone else, but people who believe in Enlightenment stuff, we have to stick together, support each other, support truth and factuality, very important, good method. And one last thing is we have to keep going. I'm afraid, because it's going to be a long fight. I don't think this fight's going to finish anytime soon, but we have to stay cheerful. And sometimes we have to have fun.
Absolutely. Thank you. I toast with my water.
Thank you.
Friend.
Thanks.
Thank you.